Eventually it'll start. Okay, it is 3:32 p.m. I'm calling this meeting of the Maple Broadband Executive Committee to order for the 8th of June, 2026. The first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda as distributed. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, Zapata, is that a second from you? Okay, would anyone like to make any edits to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Okay. Next is approval of the minutes from May 26th. So you've all had a chance to review those. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay. Zapata, is that a second? Okay. And another second from Nancy, so that's a good sign. Any edits to the minutes from May 26th? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Okay. That is unanimous. Okay, so the executive director's report. I think my main focus at the moment right now is getting BEAD up and running. There's been a couple of other things going on, obviously supporting Alex with the long drop, but mostly it's getting BEAD spun up. So we will talk about that later under the updates. But yeah, there's quite a lot of work there to make sure that we understand all of the grant requirements and all of what's going to be required to comply properly with that program. But at the moment, I don't really have any concerns or anything to flag, and it's really just been business as usual. So sorry, that's kind of a brief but to the point executive director report. Anyone have any questions for me about what's going on? Okay. All right, well, we'll move straight on then to section 5, which is discussions and key decisions. So 2026 ARPA expenditures. So the key action out of the last executive committee meeting was for me to take what we discussed in executive session around potential line extensions and spending down the rest of the ARPA money and try and figure out how we were going to do that. So I have been in contact with Syracuse Utilities because we have an existing contract with them we've been using for ARPA up to this point, because I was a little bit concerned that just given the timing of having to complete the construction and get the invoices in by end of September, trying to tack this on to the BEAD request for proposals for construction would be a little bit time constrained, and we may not be able to get everything done in time. So I've put in poll applications for the remaining areas that didn't already have poll applications in, and we got the payments for those done last week already. Haven't yet heard from GMP about the scheduling, but the ones that were done prior, the write-outs are scheduled for tomorrow. So we'll have a sense of what is involved in the make ready for those. I've been in touch with Syracuse Utilities and have sent them staking sheets and designs such as they are, and I'm waiting on pricing from them. So they are feeling positive that they will be able to move construction crews up to get this done, but don't yet have final details or anything for actual procurement approval. So if all goes well, I'll have something for the governing board next week. But that's where we are. So certainly not sitting around doing nothing, but don't yet have anything for approval today. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. The other thing I'll say is I've been in touch with the VCBB just about closeout requirements for the grants, and so I'm trying to understand what are all the documentation and closeout requirements. Luckgrove has obviously been already inspecting the plant that's been provided to date. I've been working with Todd Garth-Hafner and WCBT on getting the final as-built records ready for VCBB and just trying to understand. So they're in the state of Vermont is in its annual invoicing shutdown right now. So there won't be anything paid between now and I would say middle of July. They reopen for invoices on the 5th of July. So I'm in no hurry on this, but I'm just trying to understand, just given the fact that we're approaching the end of the grant, trying to understand what exactly is the procedure. And ideally, if things are able to go well, we'll be able to submit an invoice for the balance of the construction grant, as well as all the required documentation other than the Luckgrove inspection before the state reopens for invoicing. So wanted to let you guys know that's going on as well. So again, nothing super dramatic. I have no concerns at this point. It's really just need to make sure we understand what we need to submit and submit it. And Todd and his team, as far as they're concerned, they actually have already done all of the as-built records in their M4 system. And so he and I are back and forth on the exports. I'm going to be validating sanity checking because we just needed to make sure that for understandable reasons, in their system, they're keeping track of what is everything we've built to date. And so knowing what was phase one and what was phase two is really something that we need to provide information to them about. So I did that late last week or over the weekend. Can't really remember, but one of the two. So we're going to make sure that they get the information that is net new in regards to the phase two construction, and that we exclude anything related to the town ARPA builds. So that's the update there. Pretty straightforward. Anyone have anything they want to say or comment about that? Okay. If not, the next item on the agenda then is the hub leases. So we covered this really briefly at the end of the last executive committee meeting, but just to recap. So in general, the best practice around having hub locations is to have easements which are permanent, so that there's no worry about what happens in the lease ends of 15 or 20 years. And is the property owner going to want to extend? And if they don't, under what conditions are they going to want to extend? And so it was in the process of correspondence that Steve and I had back and forth about this just in general, that he raised the point, and I fully agree, that it would make good sense at this point to reapproach all the property owners where we have leases that I believe are 20 years, so we have another 15 years or so to go on them, but to approach all the leases that we have and try and convert those into easements, because we have money right now under ARPA, which we could convert into a capital expense. We won't necessarily have have that flexibility of capital expenditure in 20 years, although in fairness, the amount of money you should be spending on an OLT easement is not excessively onerous. But I think more to the point, if we have a property owner where right now we have a lease and they're not at this point willing to convert it to an easement, the chance that they will in 15 years is probably going to be basically the same as what it is now. And if they're not willing to convert to an easement, we have the capital now to relocate the hub, whereas we won't necessarily have that in the future. So my recommendation, such as it is that we approach, so we have 3 leases at the moment. There's Cornwall, Shoreham, and Orwell, that we approach all of those property owners, 2 of which are private and 1 of which is the town, and attempt to convert those to permanent easements. And if we're not able to do so, that we look at alternative locations for those hubs now where we are able to get easements, and we try and get that done sooner than later. So that's my recommendation. I'm pretty sure based on the end of last meeting that Steve agrees with that. So does anyone have any other thoughts, any disagreements, concerns? Zapata?
I think there's 2 options. One would be priority would be to convert them to easements, absolutely, the conveyance of ownership. But if they're not open to an easement, is there a possibility to already extend a lease to, say, 100-year lease? And then it won't matter to us anyway. So
fair enough.
But that might at least give us a sense of security, and then as time goes on, opens up a different level of opportunity as land changes over time and things like that. 20 years is just, I say, too short of a time. I've owned my land for 20 years and I expect to for another 20. So that, I think, would be the conversation. First, can we do an easement? And the town may not be able to convey an easement, and that's why I'm suggesting that being able to enter into a more of a long-term lease of, say, of 100 years, kind of like what the state of Vermont or U.S. Forest Service does with landowners who have in-holdings, is having those long-term leases.
Yep. Well, we can see it's a good point. I mean, that said, we do have permanent easements with the school district for 2 sites and the state of Vermont for 1 site. So, and actually with the town of Leicester for another site. So I'm not sure if there could be specific rules in different towns that prohibit permanent easements. or if there's just a lack of political will. But I do agree with you. I mean, the difference between an easement and a 99 or 100-year lease is, as far as I'm concerned, it's the same thing. I mean, there's a little bit of a difference, though, which is that a fair market value for an easement would actually be less than providing a broadband service for the next 100 years. Or in the town of Shoreham, we're actually providing 3 broadband services. So that would be pretty expensive to do for the next 100 years. I mean, we'd have to take that back for, that's a pretty long-term liability to be taking on, which is all the more reason why I think a first prize should be an easement where we can come back with a fixed price. And if that doesn't actually suit the property owner, we should think about what to do, because I'm not sure that as a district we're in a position to be committing to a 99-year broadband for services trade. Like we could maybe convert it from a we're providing free broadband to we're paying you a lease fee, but it's really difficult. I mean, that seems like it would be a hard thing to enter into for that long of a period of time, just because we have no idea what could possibly happen. So I think the guidance from the executive committee seems to be, let's approach the property owners and see what the possibilities are, with the preference being a permanent easement. And if we're not able to get that, we'll bring it back for discussion. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay. Anyone have anything to add? Adam? Nope. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to Calix procurement. So some months ago, Steve and I have been working with JSI to work with Calix to understand the bill of materials that we need for the BEAD build-outs, but also for the non-BEAD fundable middle mile. So we've talked about before that there's, to get between point A and point B in BEAD, you can pay for the make-ready and you can pay for the transport fiber with the BEAD funding. But to pay for the distribution fiber and the splice cases and the splicing to provide service to the addresses along the route is not allowed. So there's a difference between what we can charge the grant and what we need to fund out of our own pockets. And so we've been working with JSI, our engineering firm, and with Calix to understand similar concept applies to the network electronics. So as long as we're serving one address out of BEAD, then we need to have the network electronics be Build America, Buy America compliant and be able to trace that. But if there's addresses that we're definitely not going to serve out of BEAD, we don't have those constraints. So we have JSI worked with Calix some months ago to provide quotes on Middlebury and Ripton hubs both, how much needs to be BABA compliant and how much can be non-BABA compliant. I was hoping by the time of this meeting to have updated quotes from Calix, because just with the back and forth, it was only late last week that I became satisfied that everything was kosher in terms of the BABA compliance documentation requirements of Calix, because quite frankly, we don't need this equipment until next year, but I'd rather procure it now, just in case of price increases with chip hardware, just in case of supply chain delays, just in case our construction could happen faster than expected. I'd rather get the order in sooner than later. So all the old quotes added up to about $90,000. I would like, if it's okay with you guys, to get a motion to authorize me to enter into a purchasing arrangement with Calix for up to $100,000, just in case the prices in any of the components have increased. If they have, I can take that to the governing board next week, but I don't believe they will have done to that level. And then that will enable me to get the purchase orders out for the BABA and non-BABA for Middlebury and Ripton before next governing board meeting. So that is the request.
So moved.
All right. Can I get a second on that? Nancy or Sai, who was first? Nancy, your hand was up for longer. You can take it. All right. Is there any discussion on that? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Okay. Thank you, guys. We'll get those orders in. All right, moving on to section 6, we have updates. The Finance Committee has not met. And 6A, so that moves us on to 6B, which is the Affordable Drop Program. Alex, I would love to turn the mic over to you.
Yes, good. All right, a little more to chew on this time. So in the intervening week, we've qualified 6 more people and had 4 more contracts signed, bringing the total to 37, and all 7 site surveys that I've received have been converted successfully into contracts. I know there was a lot of work happening this week and frankly last week with Eustace, and I'm urgently pushing them to help clue me into their progress at a more regular time. But my fail-safe is our weekly meeting with them, which is tomorrow at 10. So ideally there was more progress than is reflected here, but I won't know until tomorrow. Just a couple stats that implications from this. If we keep doing 6 new qualified per week, which is what we did last week, it'll take 20 more weeks to reach the kind of 150 benchmark we had. So just that's almost 5 months, which would push us beyond the current end of the ARPA grant program. So we do need to pick up the pace. I'm hopeful that the outreach that's happening is going to maintain or even grow this number, because as people get multiple calls, then they are forced to actually reconcile with what we're offering and give me a call back. So that's actually been happening. I just, in fact, got a call during this meeting, and the message which popped up on my screen said, "Oh, I know, I've been meaning to call you. I've gotten a couple calls from your colleague Matt." So I'm hoping that this doesn't dip in the short term, and we'll find some ways to get this number higher over the long term. Of the first 7 site surveys, if you average out the projected cost of those, it's $4,500 a pop. And Ellie, I think you originally guessed it might be as much as 6,000 a pop. So right now, this is 25% less than that number. But I would hate to hang my hat on this 4,500 number until we get the actual invoices from Eustace, because they're not committing to the number in the site survey. That's an estimate, and you never know what happens when they do their underground. It might be more challenging. They might hit rock. They might, whatever the case may be. So just some preliminary stats and benchmarks for the time being, and we'll get better and more confident numbers as things go along. Oops. Any questions, comments?
I just have 2 comments. One is that part of the areas that we're looking to build with ARPA money this year are subdivisions where there's buried service, and so that may create some additional long drop customers for us. That's part of the hope and part of the reason for including some buried service as part of how we spend the rest of our ARPA money. And the
Yep.
other thing is there's no guarantees in this at this point, but we are aware that nationwide Treasury has allowed for an extension on the ARPA capital projects as long as there's an application. And we know that, sorry, we don't know anything, but we know that the VCB staff told their board at the last board meeting that they would not be doing anything without board approval. And so the next board meeting is next week, Monday. And I am anticipating that they're going to be asking the VCB board to bless an extension of the long drop program for all the CUDs, because as far as I've heard, everyone or almost everyone is also similarly behind. That just because of the delays in getting this grant out and just the delays in how long it's been to even get the grant launched to begin with, people have found other sources of service, and no one wants this money to have to be returned to Treasury. Like, we want to be able to use it here in Vermont for the purposes of this program or something else. So that,
Yeah,
not making any assumptions at this point, but that's just to be aware that's likely to happen.
And 2 comments, Ellie. One on the subdivision thing. I was actually going to ask this last week, but the conversation moved on. I assume we can install the drop. Well, can we install the drop before the main line is installed down that road? Just because we're going to be potentially pushing up against a deadline working on these 2 things at once, and at the rate at which Eustace is getting things done, I would hate to push a bunch of these till the very end if we had to wait until after the main line was constructed. We can talk about that later or think about it.
Yeah, I don't see any barriers to that. There's nothing. I'll have a look at the grant agreement, but I don't see any. I don't recall anything in the scope of work that would prohibit that.
Yeah,
But it's a
I
good
didn't see
idea.
anything, and it's just a question of, I guess, logistics as well. But I couldn't think of a reason not to. But and then the other thing is, and you probably know this, in other states that are applying for extensions, Treasury is asking for justification with language like it has to be an external issue, supply chain issue, or workforce issue. So we'll just need, if we haven't come up with that already, we'll just need to document why we're asking for an extension, or the VCB will need to do that. So anyways, that's all.
Good point. No comment for public session. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Great, and I'm
Okay.
happy to resend this slide out tomorrow after I get updates on the site survey number and other things from Eustace at 10 a.m. So if you're interested, I'll send it to Ellie and she can forward it on if people want to see it. So.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so the next section on the agenda then is to talk about BEAD. So on the BEAD side, we have been back and forth with VCBB about the scope of work for the BEAD grant agreement. And I believe we're now on the same page with what that scope of work is, which is great. I'm reviewing all of the other 84 or 83 or 85 pages, however many pages it is, of the actual terms and conditions to make sure understand what they are, see if we have any issues with those. And the other thing, which is quite relevant, is just an update that on the, so as you guys are aware, we wish to divide our project into 4 separate NEPA project areas in order to facilitate construction happening at different times. So we're not waiting on sign off on everything before we get started on anything. So I've been working very closely and collaboratively with WCBT on the detailed technical description write-up of what's in their service territory. And that's, I think, pretty much all complete. And then have also been corresponding with the VCBB and their technical consultant around just the requirements of what we need to have. And we discovered, I think they came back to us on Thursday last week, we need to make a slight modification to the boundary between the Ripton and Middlebury service areas, just as an oversimplification, to make sure that we're following some of the requirements required at federal level. So I won't bore you with the details, but we discovered this Thursday and have validated it today, and we're working on making those changes. And we're trying to get everything in by end of day Wednesday so that the state of Vermont can submit everything to the NTIA. So that's where we are with that. And then following on to that, the next focus is going to be working on starting to submit all of the buried service to make sure that we have the easements where it's a private road, and to work on getting the permits for where it's not a private road, as well as submitting the pole applications to Green Mountain Power for the areas where we haven't yet submitted the pole applications and we don't yet have estimates, and we're not expecting to take a long time. So I think the Ripton area, as we know, because it goes through the Green Mountain Finger Lakes National Forest, we're expecting the permits for the connector between Middlebury and Ripton to take some time, and we don't want to be paying for pole licenses for too many months more than necessary. So all the other areas want to make sure that we have the pole license applications in and the ride-outs done so that we understand what the cost is, and so that the day that we get the NEPA sign-off, we can give the thumbs up and the make ready. And then the other thing related to BEAD, sorry, Lynn, you have a question? You're muted.
Yes, just one quick question. Did the modification, our modification application, has that been approved?
We have not heard anything on that yet.
Okay.
Still pending. So we're assuming it's been approved because we don't have any other information, but it's a good question. And
Okay.
when we do get a final answer on that one way or the other, I'll let you know. I'm assuming a thumbs up because what else can I do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wondered if I had missed it somewhere. So thank you.
No, it's a good point. That is still pending. Final thing on BEAD. I had a final thing on BEAD. We've ordered the materials. The calyx we'll be ordering soon, and I've lost the final update I was going to give. Sorry. Can't possibly have been that important. Wasn't anything that needed a decision anyway. If I think of it later, I will come back to it. Okay, so the next section then is the parking lot. So there have been a couple of updates to the parking lot in the last month. The network management agreement is probably quite an important one. So I had a conversation with Roger Nishi from WCBT that the time that we meet next week, Monday, he and I had a preliminary conversation about some of the questions he had about some of the changes, and I explained why, and he was going to go back. And so, long story short, we're going to try and finish that off by next week, Monday, at least to make sure that we understand if he has any concerns or considerations. Because just as a matter of sequence, we want to get the changes to the current network management agreement signed off prior to the analysis that needs to happen as part of the BEAD agreement to understand what changes may need to happen to that agreement as a result of the BEAD agreement. And on that latter subject, I don't, I'm sure that the agreement is slightly different, and I don't actually obviously have a copy of the agreement that's Waitsfield has signed with NEKCV, but just as a concept, the BEAD requirements as a service in terms of the service provisioning, in terms of whatever services are shared between the two of our CUDs for the back office and the billing and customer service and whatnot, those requirements that are flowing down from the NTIA to the VCB to us BEAD recipients, and that we need to make sure occur or are properly covered in our legal agreement with WCBT, those are not going to be different between the two of our entities. So I've already spoken with Roger about this, and I've spoken with Krista about this just separately. That we're all going to join forces on this because we want to make sure that we're not. It doesn't make any sense not to be working on understanding what are the BEAD requirements as it relates to back office and customer service provisioning, and making sure that whatever changes are required for back-to-back legal agreements between ourselves and Waitsfield are covered. And the same thing, Chris is going to have the exact same thing. Because before we sign our agreement with VCBB, we need to make sure that we have a legal agreement with Waitsfield that whatever we're required to do, they are obligated to do on our behalf, where it's something that they are currently doing on our behalf. So I was kind of joking when I said to Roger and emailed to Roger and his team that this is going to be a fun legal summer, but this is really going to be a fun legal summer. If I think about what's upcoming for the next couple of months, there's going to be, and this is not news to any of you guys, but now that we have the draft BEAD agreement, this is really the focus of the next couple of weeks is to read that, analyze it, understand it. What are the implications for our network management agreement with WCBT, number one? And what are the implications as it relates to the network build that WCBT is doing for us, number two? And just making sure that we ourselves are ready for what's required for our network build, what's required for their network build, what's required for the ongoing service provisioning, and then we have those things into those three buckets, and then we actually have both an understanding from a business perspective and operations perspective and from a legal perspective that we have all these things understood and properly documented. So that is really going to be the focus in the next couple of months. Not the most sexy or exciting thing, but very important. Comments, questions? Okay, all right, so that's the network management agreement. And then the Old Town Road, Steve isn't here, but I can report that he's been in contact. So as you guys will recall, we were operating last year under Green Mountain Power's agreement or their permits on Old Town Road. And then when the federal government shut down and the weather got bad, that stopped kind of in a hurry. And because of the fact that the permit stopped, all of the construction crews lost their access to the site. And then we had the fall, and then we had the winter, and then we had the spring. And to make a long story short, there is some remediation that's required to what was built last year to make sure that it's up to proper spec, number one. And then so Steve is working on that with JSI as construction oversight, and then with Eustace as the construction firm. And then separate to that, there is another where we've been in contact with GMP, Steve in particular, to just be in touch with them because they're going to be starting the eastern side of that build later this summer when things dry out. And so we want to make sure that we're ready for that. So Again, there's not anything that requires really oversight or action, but just to make you guys aware that's going on. Any concerns about that? Nope. Okay. All right, and then as it relates to the Ripton Hub, so Steve wrote me and Zapata a pretty detailed email a couple of days ago, and to make a long story short, as we know, we have an existing easement from the school district for the property that was since purchased by the town of Ripton. The town of Ripton is wanting to move the hub to a location that's more desirable for their future development, which, if we can find an area of mutual agreement, which I think there may very well be, would actually probably be better from our perspective as well, because it would be cheaper cost to build the hub. We'd need to have fewer concerns about potentially falling trees. That said, this process takes some time. And so Steve laid out a couple of timelines in his email. And again, to make a long story short, I don't really see how we build the Ripton Hub. I don't think we have any need to build it this calendar year. And that gives us actually plenty of time to be working with them to find a mutually suitable location, because it does take time to receive the property from the school district, think about where they might like the hub to go in conjunction with a number of other considerations that they're taking on. And so my latest suggestion that Zapata, if you, because I know you chimed in over email, but just if you want to chime in here with a larger group, my suggestion is that we kind of give them a soft deadline of around the end of the year, or we can push it to the end of the winter, because the difference at end of December and end of March is kind of immaterial. Like, we're not going to be breaking ground on a hub site until the spring, most likely. So that was my thinking. Is just like, we want to be good neighbors to them, and if we can find a site that's a win-win, that's a relocation, that's great. And I don't want to put undue pressure on them to be trying to figure out a new location when we don't actually need to be breaking ground on this during this calendar year. So Zapata, as governing board executive board member and resident of Ripton, do you have any thoughts that you want to contribute to that?
Yeah, so basically the town officially takes over the transfer of ownership on July 1. In the meantime, the town has set up multiple committees to explore various options for what the existing buildings might be repurposed for, and or what the development potential of that lot might be. And so there's a variety of, as you can imagine, potential proposals, considerations, etc. And consequently, there's not too many cooks in the kitchen, but different committees that are exploring these different options for the pros, cons, and then we'll be coming back and providing recommendations to the select board. And so with Steve's approach and wanting to have that conversation with the select board sooner rather than later, I don't think will be very effective, because the select board hasn't received any information from these committees as to what this, I'll say, master plan looks like. And so it makes it really hard for the select board to move forward with any type of decision-making process regarding an easement for us and an alternative location. At the same time, we do have a viable easement in place that we have the right to build out on. So we do have, some level of leverage when that conversation does take place. So the timeframe that Ellie just laid out, I think, is appropriate to remind them that we do have this. It needs to be taken into consideration. We're willing to work with the town for their long-term vision, but we also have a deadline that we need to meet, except that deadline is not until next year. And to try and expedite that process or decision-making process is not going to be efficient at this time.
Yep.
We need to get
And
settled.
in fairness, if we're going to be, if we're relocating the same property, it's not a big re-engineering, if any. And I think that's really the understanding. So it's more just that we need to give some sort of a deadline to focus the minds, but we really don't want to be rushing them for anything. I think the only thing that we could say is that if other things go extraordinarily well, if we get the NEPA sign off really soon, that we can move forward on categorical exclusion or potentially building of hubs, and if we get the materials faster than expected, in an ideal scenario, we might want to do the civils for both hubs this fall, but I just feel like I don't want to put pressure on the town of Ripton for a maybe scenario to save a couple $1,000s. Like, I would really rather be a good neighbor to them for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is the ARPA donation that they've given us. So I think that we should basically just set their expectations, as I've suggested, that we'd really like a decision by end of year, end of January at the latest. That should be plenty of time. And that way it just gives them a deadline without a lot of pressure, political pressure. And it just focuses their minds on not taking forever to make a decision if they want to suggest some movement of the easement. Okay, I'm hearing no argument. So let's see, that was the only other updates that we had on the parking lot. And I have no other, I think the only other update that I have, such as it is, Shannon, I'll let you go in a second, is I've communicated to London Middlebury what we discussed last time about extending the nonprofit connect to municipalities. We need to meet to talk about the details of that before we launch it fully. So I just wanted to give an update to say it's in progress, hasn't yet happened, and hopefully we'll have more details by the next executive committee. Shannon, go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say is if you are free and looking for something to do on Saturday morning, come to the Virgins Green at the Energy Fair, and I believe we are having a table there. I've been talking with Ashley about that. Just need some details back, but we will have a presence there.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, did anyone have any other business to bring up? This has been a really fast meeting, but is not a lot of decisions, just a couple of updates today. Fast is good. Get some time back in our day.
Zapata, can I ask you a question unrelated to Maple Broadband after everybody adjourns?
Sure, although if Ellie signs off, I don't know if you and I stay on, so we may have to send a separate Teams invite.
will.
So why don't I? We will?
will.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, it'll be quick, I
Good.
think. Thank you.
Fine.
Okay, so our next meeting then, Nancy, go ahead. You're muted. The next meeting is Monday, the 22nd at the usual time. Is that right? That's weird. It's not on my calendar. What's going on? Is that what you're asking about? Is why it's not in your calendar?
It is the fourth. It is the fourth Monday. And we're doing second and fourth Monday. We're doing second and fourth Mondays for the executive committee.
Mm-hmm. I've
Oh, no,
got
there
it
it
on
is.
mine.
Sorry, it was just later. All right. Okay. I hadn't scrolled down far enough. Okay. Yeah, so our next executive committee meeting is the 22nd, Monday at 3:30 p.m., the usual time.
One
So,
more thing.
Lynn?
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm not at the meeting next week because I'm away for the week.
Okay.
The governing board meeting.
That's fine. I don't think there's anything that is urgent that requires your update. I just have an update on the ARPA spending, and so that's fine. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay.
Okay, so I will see you guys. Well, those of you who I don't see next week, Monday at the governing board, I will see you on the 22nd at 3:30.
Great.
And I'm going to stop the recording now, and the rest of us can drop off.
Great.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank
See
you.
everyone.
Everyone.
Really.